And welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Dave Morris here in the Oklahoman's video studio. Perhaps it's a comedy show. We're just kind of laughing at some of the things that happened in studio this week. And we'll recap some of those for you during this segment and look ahead to some of the coverage we had this weekend, including a full tournament schedule with the NCAA Tournament right down the street in Oklahoma City. I'm joined by Kelly Fry, editor of the Oklahoman. We have Phil O'Connor and Mike Sherman, sports editor, off the news desk. Guys, thanks for your time this morning. We appreciate it. Some of the big stories this week here locally, the state Senate passed the Costello Act 42-0. That's a bill that outlines qualification for treatment. Kelly will get into that with a little bit of detail. President Obama submitted his nomination to succeed Antonin Scalia on the U.S. Supreme Court. That is Merrick Garland, who has Oklahoma City ties. And as I mentioned, the Sooners are among those teams here in Oklahoma City for the NCAA Tournament as March Madness gets rolling right here in our city. And guys, we're looking out the window, and it's a little bit busier in downtown today, which is nice to see. So the Skirvin last night. Looks like the Sooners are staying there, so hopefully no bed bugs, right?
And I think by choice,
no.
David, I think they wanted to stay there.
It is a fantastic place. The widow of the late Labor Commissioner Mark Costello, Kathy Costello, was at the Capitol this week. The Senate passed 42-0 the Labor Commissioner Mark Costello Act. Kelly, that's legislation that would allow residents who receive care from the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services to be court-ordered to take their medication after multiple treatment attempts. What does this mean?
That's right, Dave. Well, a lot of times when people are struggling with a mental illness, one of the greatest challenges is to get them to stay on medication. And if family members have the ability to get the courts involved and help mandate that medication, it can really make a difference in their lives. Kathy Costello has just been a great champion for this. She's fighting out there, fighting for for her husband's legacy, because that was so important to him. And it was just a really good day. And the fact that they endorsed it 42-0, I mean, I think that says a lot.
Christian Costello is Kathy Mark's son.
Yes, who is in the Oklahoma County Jail, charged with the murder of his father. And he, unfortunately, the same day we were talking to Kathy about this bill, at the same time she let us know that her son had actually been beaten up in the county jail. So she was concerned that he wasn't getting his proper medication in there, and frankly she said, probably he was acting out in some way that irritated maybe the other inmates, and ultimately he got beat up. So very unfortunate.
That's raised a lot of questions too about the jail administration, why he was with the general population, why they ran out of the medication.
Exactly.
There's a lot of questions about some mistakes that may have been made at that end as well.
Yeah.
So.
Christian Costello was hospitalized 10 times, just a little background for you, in his teen and adult years, including 5 times the last year during a 3-month period. And the Costellos struggled to get Christian to take his medicine. He was an adult. He generally didn't have to if he didn't want to, right?
Right. I mean, that's a huge challenge for families. So to be able to get some teeth into it, I think that'll go a long way for helping people.
And I think another big problem in the mental health community for parents is once a kid turns 18, and we've talked about this, the inability of a parent to have much of a role. I mean, the person is an adult, and legally the parent doesn't have access to the medical records, can't speak to the doctor, all those kinds of things that as a concerned parent with a child that's facing struggles, you want to be involved, you want to be helping, and a lot of times just the way the laws are set up makes it difficult to do that.
Yeah, you can feel like the system's working against you.
One thing you guys mentioned and kind of dovetailed into this, the jail and some of the issues there. Kelly, can you outline that? There's a 17-member task force looking at issues such as mental health and the jail and what can be done.
Right, that is a task force that is led by Clay Bennett in the Oklahoma City Chamber. I serve on that task force, and really looking at who are we putting in our jails. Other cities, for example, Albuquerque has had a lot of luck. They went through Vera, which is the consulting firm that we're using for the jail. And really it's looking at every step along the way. But Albuquerque was able to greatly reduce their jail population by instituting more things like drug court and better housing for mental health. Just a lot of different steps that you can actually take, and then maybe, our jail is crumbling, but maybe we don't need a whole new jail, maybe we need a smaller jail. It's really just digging into the details of that to make the best determination. The second Vero report will be out, I think, in a matter of, within probably the next 4 to 6 months.
More coverage can be found on this story as we go along, including this weekend. Jacqueline Cosgrove has a story, right?
Jacqueline has a great story this weekend. It'll be in the Sunday paper. And it takes one example of somebody who struggled with mental illness and ended up in prison. And so it kind of looks like at his life as the challenges he had along the way and kind of where, things just started falling apart for this young man. And now he is in prison. And just it's a really close look, and it really puts a face on the issue.
All right, very good. More coverage on that, like I mentioned, will be in the Oklahoman this weekend, and ongoing coverage, archive coverage, can be found online at newsok.com. Moving on now, as I mentioned off the top of this, President Obama nominated his choice to succeed Antonin Scalia on the U.S. Supreme Court. It's Merrick Garland. Now, he was in Oklahoma City back in the mid-'90s as the bombing trials went through. He worked on both Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols' trials. We spoke with Terry Watkins earlier this week via Skype. She was in Washington, D.C. She actually had lunch with Merrick Garland, as it turns out, earlier this week. Let's go to that clip.
I think Merrick's a very fair man that understands process and believes in the process of fairness and openness and building trust. And I think one of the stories that stands out to me is when he was flown by the FBI plane to come to Oklahoma City on that Friday after the bombing. He would be one of the first to do a preliminary hearing for McVeigh at Tinker out in the JAG courtroom. And when he got it there, he realized there was no media present. And one of the things he felt that was important was to bring the media in. And the FBI then said, well, we're on an Air Force base. And he said, exactly, and you're the FBI, so you guys go work it out. And we'll hold this hearing when we have some representation of the media. And so as he reflected on that story, I've heard that story from both media and from Merrick. And I heard him tell that story to my teenage daughter on Sunday, just as one of the important lessons he had learned through this process is to always be a consensus builder and to build trust. And I think he was someone we could trust in this process. He was one of the lead folks from Justice.
Kerry Watkins speaks very highly. I say Merrick Garland. With all due respect, it's Judge Garland. I'm quite sure he's earned that, but she speaks quite highly of him, and he was perhaps the right guy for the right time, at the right time during the trials here.
Right. Well, just the story that Kerry tells, I mean, that, of course, warms my heart because, if you'll stand up for openness and you'll stand up for the First Amendment, I think that's an important role that we could use on the Supreme Court.
During that trial, another story that came out was even though, like a Ryder truck, the various companies that were in the mix here willingly giving documents to the feds and as part of the investigation, Judge Garland said, no, we're going to get you a subpoena for this. It's got to be by the book. I don't want this down the road coming back and backfiring. However, the Republicans are not so sure they're going to hear his nomination, right, Phil?
Right, yeah. I mean, this guy has a 20-year record with the Washington, D.C. Court of Appeals. He's the Chief Justice on that court. Really highly regarded by the Republican, Senate Judiciary members in the past when he was previously nominated. I mean, this is obviously a political test. Obama's put up the best judge that he can. That makes it very difficult for the Republicans to reject. And if they reject this judge, I mean, it raises a lot of questions about. It doesn't raise questions. It exposes the. I don't want to say hypocrisy, but it exposes clearly what the goal is. It's not to try and find the best judge necessarily for the Republicans in this case. It's simply to block any effort by a Democratic president to select the next judge, or this Democratic president to select the next judge. They just feel they have a better chance of, if they hold off, maybe they get the opportunity to appoint the next one, and they don't want Obama to have a third choice. So.
Yeah, in fact, they do say that they want that to go to a vote of the people in 2016, and Obama yesterday said, actually, the vote of the people happened in 2012. This is my right to do this. So.
I mean, I get it. I mean, both parties have done this. The Democrats did it the last time. They call it the Schumer rule. He tried to do the exact same thing with George Bush's appointment to the court. But the unfortunate thing is that a great jurist, one that both parties recognize as being someone who is a very conscientious, down-the-middle jurist who has great respect in both parties, will probably be denied a spot on the court.
It's a harsh career, isn't it?
It is, Dave, but you know what's impressive about this? It says something about him that he allowed his name to go forward in all this. We learn these stories that Kerry Watkins relates, but also that he believes so much in the law that he would allow himself to go forward, because everybody, we all look at this and say, this is probably not going to happen. This guy might just be sort of cast aside. But he says, yes, I'll do it. That tells me something. That tells me a little bit about him.
And if you saw the press conference in the Rose Garden when the announcement was made, it was obviously an emotional moment for him. He could barely contain himself. And you know, I mean, it is for someone in the legal profession, it is the greatest honor that you can possibly have. I think it's to be appointed to the United States Supreme Court. And I think you're exactly right. I mean, he knows he's not going to get this spot, I got to think, right? And yet to be allowed, knowing that the potential was if he had waited for the next president, Republican or Democrat, he would be a good consensus choice, early in a term. But late in this term, I mean, I think he set himself up to never get the position.
Is it too much to hope that his record, the stories like this one get told on the Senate floor, in the committee room? He doesn't get appointed. We have an election, and then whoever's elected says, you know what, I really want to, as a way to try to unify the country, we've agreed on this, the people have spoken, let's go ahead and nominate him again.
The Republicans are refusing to even meet with him, have the courtesy calls. Some of them have.
Now, Senator Langford said he'd meet with him.
Yeah, some of them have said they will meet with him. Some of them said we'll meet with him, but I can tell you what the answer is going to be. It doesn't appear that there will be any hearings held on his nomination. So the one thing that has been thrown out there is that, maybe he is nominated again. Maybe they hold it until after the election. And that raises a whole constitutional question where that could actually be of whether President Obama could nominate someone, but that person wouldn't be, have his hearings or be sworn in until after Obama left office. I'm not sure the next president would be so cool with that. But anyway, so it does speak to the fractured nature of the political system in Washington.
I asked Carrie, you had lunch with a judge on Sunday. Did he know? Did he indicate anything? She said, well, not really, but he was in a really good mood. So he may have already known at that point, or was feeling pretty good about things. But she did ask him on the way out, are you ready for this? Are you ready to handle this? And he's like, hey, I dealt with the bombing trial and the Atlanta Olympics, I believe. He was involved with that.
And the Unabomber, I believe, as well.
Wow. Right.
He was like, yeah, compared to those things, the Senate, Republicans, Democrats, no problem.
No stranger to pressure.
Hey, one last thing, though, speaking to his character, and we have a bite, and this was provided by the Oklahoma City National Memorial, Merrick Garland, Judge Garland, talking about working here in Oklahoma City.
Most significant thing I worked on, it was the thing that I feel like I was able to make the biggest personal contribution to something. Lots of things lawyers work on, they don't feel like, in the end, you don't know whether it makes any difference or not. And I think other people could have done the same, but I think that being there makes you feel like, you had a role to play in the investigation and helping pull people together, and it's a very satisfying feeling for a lawyer.
All right, so more coverage about Merrick Garland, including the interviews we had with Kerry Watkins and with Chris Castile, who echoes some of Phil O'Connor's statements here about what may happen moving forward. And moving forward, the NCAA Tournament kicked off Tuesday, I guess. That's the first 4 games. And then last night we saw a whole bunch of games. And then today Oklahoma City gets in the mix. Mike Sherman, sports editor of the Oklahoman. You've been at the arena. You were there yesterday for shoot-arounds. What's the atmosphere like?
The atmosphere is interesting. You got Texas cousins who don't speak to each other, both in town. A&M and the Aggies and the Longhorns from Texas, they're playing other people tonight. But if they both win on Sunday afternoon in Oklahoma City, there will be something that neither of them wanted to happen, which they'll play again. Of course, that happened. The breakup happened when the SEC recruited A&M to move over there. Texas, a lot of it was they were repelled by the Longhorns. So that's a big storyline. Of course, the storyline for us, David, is the Sooners. The Sooners are really looking good. As Barry Trammell wrote in Monday's editions, the road to Anaheim and even the road to the Final Four in Houston is very favorable for the Sooners. But as Phil points out, it wasn't all that favorable yesterday for the Big 12, so we shall see.
Good history of collapsing in this thing. So,
Mike, what is your role in the tournament as APSC? You have kind of a different way of helping out those in the media who are here in Oklahoma City. Can I kind of outline that?
Well, first and foremost, I serve at the behest of the editor of the Oklahoman. I'm most there for the readers of the Oklahoman. And we had a special section today, which people should pick up. Yeah. However, I'm also sort of sitting right in the middle of the media room. For a long time, as the NCAA tournament got bigger, the working press started losing some of its spots for covering. Access started shrinking. Our seats down on the court started shrinking. And a couple years ago, the president of APSE, who I followed as president, Jerry Ahern, who is now sports editor or managing editor for sports of USA Today, negotiated sort of a peace settlement with the NCAA. And there are liaisons for APSE all around at all the sites. And I am the one here in Oklahoma City. I'm a Goodwill ambassador. I'm an advisor.
Are you on a Segway?
I'm not on a Segway. I wish that.
Or wear a cool.
I'm getting one. I should have asked for one.
Do you have a whistle or anything cool?
Not even a gold hat. But I'm there to make sure the writers have good seats. You have writers from papers that cover Green Bay. You have writers that cover papers from Northern Iowa. So they need to be able to sit close and cover their teams rather than having a bunch of other people who are broadcast partners and all that stuff. There needs to be a fair balance of who gets on the court side. Fortunately, worked great with Rob Kroll with Big 12. They handled the seating chart just fine. And then the basic stuff you need, David. You need plugs, you need wireless, you need to know when the interview sheets are. You need to make sure that the cooling off period doesn't last too long. There's a 10-minute cooling off period after the game that then we're allowed to go into the locker rooms. Sometimes teams abuse that. And so I'm sort of there to say, time's up. Can we get in there now? So little things like that. Make sure things happen as they should for the working media.
Should note that Mike Sherman also has some pretty good hustle. We saw some people getting a newspaper outside in front of the building. He hustled out there to give them one, so great customer service there.
Always on the move.
What are we hearing on ticket sales so far?
Good. Now, they were worried about it. There was, of the regionals, they all sold out except immediately almost, except for Oklahoma City and one other, I can't remember which, but it's picked up. There's seats available up in the corners, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. All the lower bowls sold out, all the other stuff so there's tickets available for all sessions, but they're limited and they're up in the corners. So
if OU loses, there'll be plenty of tickets available, though, right?
In theory. They'll all be on the secondary market. Now, of course, Oklahoma, they could lose. Cal State Bakersfield is in town, 15 seed versus 2 seed. Those upsets do happen. Never before has a 16 beat a 1 in the NCAA tournament history. I don't look for the Sooners to lose, but their cousins from Bakersfield are in town. Barry Trammell wrote about that today in the Oklahoman. Bakersfield's a lot like Oklahoma for obvious reasons.
Very true. Oregon State, VCU tips off 12:30. You can watch that on TNT. The Sooners at 3:15, 3:30. Yeah. Cal State, CSU Bakersfield, if you will. Cal State Bakersfield, that game at 3 o'clock. The nightcap, Texas and Northern Iowa at 8:50, preceded by Texas A&M versus Green Bay.
Green Bay, not the Packers. They're the Phoenix.
Those two games tonight are on TBS. Kelly, you filled out a bracket.
I had a special dispensation from the sports editor. I filled my bracket out about 30 minutes ago.
Mike, you had a quick chance to look at it. What do you think?
12-6.
Well, I didn't know any of the winners.
I've had worse opening days, so.
12-4. I think I did the math wrong. 12-4.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep up. So.
Yeah. Listen, my son did the very same thing. He had a baseball doubleheader yesterday. People want to be a part of this. I say, Big Tent, let them in.
We mentioned the brackets. You can download a printable bracket on newsok.com. We will have updates from every game here in Oklahoma City, as well as throughout the tournament. We'll have sound bites and interviews from the press rooms. Your guys and ladies will be providing interviews as well, as we'll have all that coverage for you on newsok.com as well. Anything you want to preview this weekend, Mike?
Well, I want to preview it's a big weekend for sports in Oklahoma. You've got OSU wrestling, something that sort of goes off the map a little bit, but OSU wrestling's in New York City in a cool platform, Madison Square Garden. That's not something you normally associate with college wrestling, but there they are. And the Cowboys are wrestled back into the picture. I look for them to win the title, so that'll be a big story. Of course, our coverage on Sunday will have a lot of that. The Thunder is playing really well. Don't look now, but sort of under the radar as our focus goes to the NCAA tournament, all of a sudden they're taking care of the ball a lot better and playing some defense. that's going to be interesting to see. So,
Kevin Durant scored over 20 points in like 350 straight games. I mean, he really is playing well.
He is, and we sort of take that for granted, Dave. That's sort of like, yeah, but, right? But his excellence and Russell Westbrook's excellence, the Thunder in the last couple of games have really sort of gotten it back. So they're playing again this weekend. The big thing, however, Sunday afternoon, the Sooners, we don't know what time they're playing, but they'll be playing for a place in the Sweet 16, which pushes all this March Madness over into another week.
Phil, we mentioned Jacqueline Cosgrove has a story coming up this weekend. What's coming off your area?
We've got some stuff coming up on work being done out at Tinker Air Force Base on repairing the B-1 bomber.
Right.
After more than a decade of constant use in the wars, they're kind of standing those down for a while and trying to make some big fixes.
Those things are loud.
Yeah.
There was one that circled through downtown last week. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Those are crazy loud.
Yeah. So we'll have an inside look at some of that. We've got a story coming up early next week on a woman who traveled to Greece to deal with the refugee crisis there. You know, just saw it and couldn't not do something about it. So actually went and worked on the beach herself. So that's just some of the stuff we've got.
Very good. We'll get out on one last clip. Earlier this week, Henry Winkler, the Fonz, stopped by. That's right. That's a 20-minute interview you can watch online, but to that point, we have a clip of him talking about the Fonz and pop culture. One last point. Of course, he starred as the Fonz on Happy Days, the leather jackets in the Smithsonian. You see the movie The Martian in the book, and there's the reference.
Isn't that great?
It's lived on in pop culture. What is your thought when you see these things pop up?
You know what? It is a great compliment. I love the Fonz. He built a house around me. He put food on my table, sent my kids to college, introduced me to the world, and I did that all by saying E. And then I added one word, whoa. And I built a career on that. Not bad.
Arthur Fonzarelli, ladies and gentlemen. Henry Winkler was gracious as could be. Seemed like a real genuine guy in a very large green puffy jacket.
Right. He took a lot of pictures with folks in the newsroom, so yeah, he's a good guy.
I noticed it was the young folks getting their picture taken with him,
know,
right?
I know. I was glad to see that they knew who he was.
All right, we'll leave it right there. The Week in Review. Thanks, guys, for your time. We appreciate it. These stories and upcoming editions of the Oklahoman and online at newsok.com. Have a great weekend, everyone.